Hey, Raising Athletes podcast listeners. I'm thrilled to announce our new proud partner, Corvive Natural Health Supplements. Corvive offers top-notch natural products designed to boost your health and wellness. From hydration to daily supplements, Corvive has you covered. Check them out today at kirstenjones.com. That's KirstenJonesinc.com or corvive.com, corvive.com, and use promo code Kirsten, KIRSTEN, to experience the difference for yourself.
Hi,
Once you know it's for real,
I know.
you're like,
Okay, let's stop. Hi, I'm Kirsten Jones,
and I'm Susie Walton.
and this is our podcast, #Raising Athletes with Kirsten and Susie.
Our passion is supporting parents and raising not only strong athletes, but extraordinary people.
Join us each week as we tackle all topics youth sports, including everything from early specialization and overuse injuries
To helping our kids feel empowered and learn how to advocate for themselves, not only in the classroom and on the court, but at dinner tables and in their communities.
We'll be talking to coaches, athletes, parents,
And anyone else who will speak to us.
about their experiences with youth sports and their paths to success.
And even more importantly, their failures. Yes, we're going to get into the gritty details of what went wrong so that we can all learn from it. Teach our kids
And ourselves.
how to do better next time.
Because in the words of Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. So welcome to Raising Athletes, because we love to win too.
Let's do this.
Hey, Raising Athletes podcast listeners. Are you feeling stuck or looking to elevate your life to the next level? I've got something amazing for you. There are tools that I have in the book. It's what I use when I work with my athletes and clients one-on-one. All that you need to help you figure out what's getting in your way, holding you back, releasing your limitations, and getting to the next level. We have another course starting this fall, so join the Mindset Workshop and discover how to unlock your true potential. This workshop is packed with powerful techniques to help you overcome obstacles, achieve your goals, and transform your mindset. It's time to turn those dreams into reality. I've heard from so many people who said this workshop changed their lives, giving them the confidence to pursue their dreams and feel unstoppable. So don't miss out. Head over to kirstenjonesinc.com to secure your spot on the waiting list today. That's right, KirstenJonesinc.com. Get on the waiting list today. Trust me, you won't regret it. Let's do this. Hey, Raising Athletes podcast fans, Kirsten here, and I have to share my new favorite hydration secret with you, Corvive's Hydrate in Pink Lemonade. If you're looking for the ultimate hydration boost, this is it. Corvive's Hydrate is an NSF certified for sport, trusted by 4 Major League Baseball teams and 3 military bases. With 6 grams of pure organic cane sugar, it ensures you absorb all the electrolytes you need. And get this, it has 3 times the electrolytes and 4 times less sugar than those leading brands. Plus, it's developed using the World Health Organization's standards for oral rehydration solutions, making it the equivalent of a bag of IV fluids. Best of all, there are no artificial dyes or sweeteners. It's so perfect for the entire family. You can drink it any time of day, before, during, or after workouts or sports. So say goodbye to sugary juices and hello to superior hydration with Corvive's Hydrate in Pink Lemonade. Visit corvive.com. That's CORVIVE.com. And use promo code Kirsten. That's KIRSTEN for 30% off your order. Try it today and feel the difference. Hello and welcome. My name is Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach and the author of Raising Empowered Athletes. How do we help and support raise not only strong athletes, but extraordinary people? When Susie Walton and I created this podcast 5 years ago and over 100 episodes ago,
we really started with ourselves and ourselves as athletes and what we experienced as athletes, you know, in her version, the 60s, mine in the 70s and 80s. And now we move forward into today's world and how vastly different it is for our kids. It's a now $37 billion business, youth sports. And some of the enticing stuff that we see out online comes with a lot of bad, you know, potentially a rough underbelly. So today's guest, who I met when I was up in Bend a couple months ago, and she has a new book coming out, which everybody needs to read. And it's coming out in June, but you can pre-order it now. We're going to talk about the price she pays and mental health in teens and girls sports. So thank you, Katie, for making time to come on today and be with us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. The second we met in Bend, there was this like kindred spirit. So thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes, we immediately bonded. We're like, okay, we need to go have lunch. We got to talk about this. And we do. We have many similarities in our paths and our journey. And so I would love to start with and to lay the groundwork. I think it's always interesting to hear people's background and how they got into what they're doing and why they're doing it. So could you share your story with us?
Yeah, it's funny. My story is always like this, like gutting, where I could talk about mental health and sport for days. My story, I always get like this, like paralysis, like, my own story. It's like still somewhat gutting, even though it's been a couple decades now. I was a runner I played all sports as a kid. Our family was active. And then in high school, kind of specialized in running and loved running. I loved the bonding. I loved the experience. And it turned into opportunity before I really even knew what was happening. Back in the day, you know, you couldn't get recruited before your senior year. It was like July 1st or something of you're going into your senior year. And so got a lot of offers, had the kind of opportunity to go where I wanted. And I chose Oregon, not for its like iconic track and field history, but more because of the bond I felt with the coach. And got there and it was just dramatically different than what I thought I had signed on for and the relationship that I felt with her through the recruiting process. And eventually it was a kind of toxic environment. She ended up putting in her notice, was gone by the end of the first year. This new kind of bigwig coaching staff came in my sophomore year. That transition was hard for me, competed pretty well that fall. And then the wheels kind of came off the bus. And there was this coach who was unofficially part of the program, Alberto Salazar, who was with Nike, but was coaching one of the male athletes. He kind of took me under his wing and scooped me on. Like I was like depleted. I said to Tiffany before, I'm like, I was like a broken little bird, and he like scooped in, and it felt like he was just like rescuing me and saving me. He referred me to this doctor in Texas who gave me this thyroid med. Anyways, long story short, as things do, and why I love this work so much now is that I learned about the mind-body connection and I kept going, and I was still broken and I wasn't doing my own healing, but I kept going in this like objective to keep running and achieving the goals that I had set out to achieve going to college athletically. Alberto ended up helping me transfer and continued to oversee my medical care. I ended up getting to the new school, Florida State, tore the ligaments and tendons in my ankle, got a couple stress fractures, and spent 9 months in a boot, right? Because like I hadn't taken care of what I needed to. My body's like, enough, girlfriend, like you're done. This is it. So ended up graduating, moving back to Oregon. And at 28 years old, I found out that I was sitting in a fertility doctor's office and found out that I was treated for a thyroid condition I never had, which was unearthing, right? To like, I had gone all these years with this perceived medical history, experience, kind of how I had narrated the story of college athletics, and then it all got flipped on its head. So then I was going through fertility treatment. So that kind of took a backseat until all of our kids were born. And then it just kind of popped open as trauma does, right? And it needed a place to go. And so I poured my heart and soul into this project and the mission to change athletic systems to ensure that athletes' well-being and mental health is considered. And I mean, ideally prioritized.
Great. Okay, so much to unpack there, right? And I know the listeners because I had, I had 500 questions when you told me that first story. I keep wanting to put a pin in it. And no, let's talk about, I mean, so maybe we start with back at the beginning of your getting into University of Oregon and being on that track team, the toxic environment, which I can relate to. I had a toxic environment in a high school sports situation too, and then actually again in college. What was that? What was going on there? It was about food and about. I think you had some quotes in the book about what the coaches were calling some of the girls. Maybe you can share a little bit about what that actually looked like.
Yeah, I mean, at 18, it's hard to put a finger on it, right? You're just kind of like, this is weird and it feels odd. And I had this like dear roommate who is still a really tender, sweet friendship. And we would go to the cafeteria and be like, what are we supposed to eat? Or team dinners. And you're like, what is happening? Like, it just feels weird. I've never sat at a table where it feels this way. And it was still like the caliper testing days, right? So you'd have to get your body fat of like your back, belly, arms squeezed to figure out your body fat. Never really given a ton of guidance of what that was supposed to be, but leaner was better. And there were really lean, if you will, gals on the team. So as 18, you're like, is that what it's supposed to be like? How am I supposed to be? But you couldn't really quantify it. It just felt weird. It felt different. But as a reference point to college sports, it was kind of like, maybe this is just how it is. Like, this is a whole different level than when we were competing in high school. So maybe this is an us problem. Well, partway through, I think it was after the first semester, because before winter break, they cut a bunch of people from the team. And my roommate was one of them. So then she was gone, who felt like this, like the only real ally. And I was in this room by myself trying to navigate this system. Marnie then, who was my primary coach, she left, and I didn't know. I flew down there last spring and met with her. She lives in Arizona now. And it wasn't until that visit that I learned the extent of what was happening and what her experience was. And what she said so eloquently is, she said, I couldn't coach ethically and the way I wanted to in a system that was so toxic. And so she had to leave. And, you know, as an athlete, you don't know all of those details or what that really means, other than that there's turnover and all of these like business decisions being made. So I know a lot more now than I knew then. And my roommate said, this was within the last couple of years, a bunch of stuff came out about Oregon a couple of years ago. And I was like, can you believe this? Is this the same stuff that we went through, just wrapped differently? And she goes, isn't that the price of being an athlete though? And I was like, what? No, like that's the exact thing that like we're conditioned to believe, because we are competing at this university. It is acceptable to be treated the way in which we were treated. And it's not. Like, that's not okay under any circumstance. Doesn't matter what type of scholarship you're on or not.
Did you have any recollection of anybody in that time ever raising their hand and asking a question, or was it just go along to get along, or you're going to be out, so I better just do what they say?
Yeah, I mean, in full transparency, like, I don't remember a ton from that time, so I don't want to rewrite it in the sense of I don't know. I don't recall people raising their hand. I don't remember that being an overt discussion. That being said, I only remember what I remember. I do, after Marnie and this first group left, I have vivid memories of a couple discussions I had with this new coaching staff about philosophies and training plans and expectations. I have some really clear memories of conversations with them, but I really don't from my freshman year, because I mean, that's a huge transition anyway, right? Like, you're like in a tornado transitioning to college, and then this paired with it, I didn't know what was what, I don't think.
But it was all about weight. It was all about making the lighter, the better, right? So was there a lot of focus on skinnier, like to your point was, you didn't even know what the goal was. It was just less, right?
Totally. Less was more. I remember this was the next coaching staff I went to, and I said, I haven't had a period in, I don't even know how long. And they looked at me and they said, that's great. That means your body fat is right where we want it.
Whoa,
what?
You're not ovulating. Yeah, that's crazy.
There was another discussion. I went into a trainer, they're doing regular massages, and they looked at me and I mean, I was thin. I feel really lucky to have come out of college without an eating disorder. And I'm sure there were elements of disordered eating, but not like lifelong. But I walked into this trainer and they looked at me and they're like, what are you, like 103 pounds? And I was like, and I remember thinking like, is that what I'm supposed to be? And at the time, I very vividly remember weighing 117 pounds, which was very thin.
Very thin.
For my body and what I know about my body, especially now, I'm like, wow, that was like really probably unhealthy. But as an 18, 19-year-old being like, is 103 where I'm supposed to be? Is that like what they're expecting of me? Why is that? What does that number mean?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of focus on weight, focus on body.
It's interesting you say you don't have vivid memories of exactly what went down. And I feel the same way. I don't recall exactly the discussions, but same. I got to San Diego State. They were redshirting me, and he put me on a 5-day-a-week lifting program. Like, you're lifting heavy weights to try to get stronger. And then they expected my body fat. We did underwater body weighing, right, to get the most accurate. So I was 14% body fat. I remember that very clearly. And he said, you're too fat. And they use that word, right? You're fat. You need to lose weight. And I remember one of the girls who literally was anorexic would take the bagel that she would eat, hollow it out, and just put a little bit of cottage cheese in, and that's all she would eat all day. And I just remember thinking, wow, and to your point, like at 18, I've never, played D1 volleyball before. Is this what it takes, right? Is more the questions you're going through. And so parents listening, athletes listening, right? That's the part that I think people are always like, well, why didn't you just ask somebody? Well, why didn't you say something? I remember going on a road trip actually and him not allowing me to eat. We went out to dinner with the team and him saying, Kirsten, you can't eat, right? Like, and nobody says anything, right? Like, that's just okay. It's just like, and it's ludicrous today when you think about it in hindsight. But then you go, sorry, to transition back to you go to Florida State, and the first thing they do is up your miles, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head with the stories. And I think the fact that we share those stories, like we're a dime a dozen, right? Like that is the story, is the fact that we all have those. And what a pivotal age to be like, I don't even know up from down. That's so confusing. You don't know enough. So many people say like, of course people had to have known. They should have just spoken up. And it's like, that's not how it works. It's not that easy, right? Like, of course, duh. It doesn't work that way though. Otherwise people would be. That's, and the same thing happened at Florida State. I got there was a coaching change that summer. I remember getting the call from the coach who had recruited me, who the criticism from the current team about him was that he was a little soft. And I was like, that is just what I need. Like, I knew enough to know I was tender. But I didn't know how to go about that, other than that I needed a little bit more like wraparound support in that way. And he called me the summer before, a few weeks before I was leaving. He goes, well, I know everything you've been through, so I wanted to call you and say, firsthand, there is going to be a coaching change. I'm going to oversee it. We still want to do your plan where it's still a really slow phase in, but I'm mostly going to be working with the men. And for whatever reason, to your point, you're kind of like, okay, cool. Like, I totally trust you. You don't even know the questions to ask or why that, like, what that actually is going to mean, or that it might not actually look that way. You just, like, I took him at face value, got there. The coach was very different. The soft would be the last word I would ever use to describe her. And my mileage went from really low to really high. I was doing workouts in spikes really quickly. I felt foot pain. I remember feeling that and just being like, stay the course. Like, you've got to earn your spot, girlfriend. Like, you got to just show up and toe the line. And then my foot was fragile. We were at a golf course. I rolled my ankle and there was nothing I could do from there. So,
yeah. So then you see these, I mean, again, now looking back, hindsight, and you're like, well, of course, and you weren't eating. And then let's go back to the thyroid thing. We don't even know why. And again, you were just told by an expert that you're going to need to take this, right? And you don't even know why you were put on it, even still to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I have hypotheses at this point, and I've consulted a lot of doctors and other people who were affiliated with the program. But I don't have any confirmation. And my doctors have tried to take me off of the medication numerous times. But at that point, I had been on it so long that my body became reliant on it. I didn't remember this until going through my medical records when writing The Price She Pays. They were altering my doses, so I would pass out. And there's documentation of like an ER visit where my roommate had to take me into the ER. I passed out while driving because my dosage was so low and my levels were so low. So and again, didn't remember that until reading the records. So I don't know
But
how.
generally, what is the medicine for? It's to run faster. It's to lose weight. It's to
Metabolism. Okay. So if I had to share my hypothesis, what my hypothesis is I was basically a guinea pig for him to be able to test medication so he could use it on his elite squad. Do I have confirmation of that? No. Is that my hypothesis? Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. Because you went off of it at one point, right? And then he put you back on it, right?
Correct. I mean, and ultimately I did make the choice to go back on it. I consented to go back on it. That being said, under the guise that I thought I had a thyroid condition. Right? I definitely consented to them doing medical manipulation. I did take the thyroid medicine, but I thought it was because I had a thyroid condition.
Amazing, right? Okay, so let's raise up to the 10,000 foot and get into what you're doing now and why this is so important. So can you kind of talk about on a bigger level and what your mission is around mental health in sport? What is that? I think, again, we hear, Kevin Love, or we hear, different athletes that are saying, I'm going to take a break. And people are like, yeah, well, suck it up. That's part of you being a professional athlete. How do we identify, what do we call it? What do we, in a healthy way, help our athletes know when they need help and be able to say, it's okay to ask?
Totally. And I think starting from the framework of everybody has mental health. Some people have more acute mental health symptomology or diagnoses or conditions, but everybody has mental health. So just like how an athletic system has a very clear protocol for if you tear your ACL, if you roll your ankle, the system knows how to respond. The systems don't know how to respond if anybody has anxiety or depression or suicidality or an eating disorder. Everybody panics and then has to be reactive. And so the goal is that we can create, just like how there's a very clearly established wheel for physical health, we need the same created for mental health so that systems don't have to scramble in a crisis, but rather can be more proactive in responding so that we can move more upstream. So it doesn't have to get to an eating disorder, that it can be addressed at some disordered eating tendencies because the system was able to recognize what was happening and the system's impact on that athlete that could be contributing to some of those tendencies or ways of coping, right? Eating disorders are oftentimes a way of coping.
Yeah. So at what level is that being implemented? At the college level, at the pro level, at the high school level? Like, where are we seeing people actually saying, this is a priority and we need to make sure it's part of our program?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of smirking. I know we're on a podcast. At no level. That's really the problem. There is NCAA rolled out kind of best practices, but what we need this to be mandated, right? This can't be a choice. This can't be elective. It has to be something that is enforced. And we know if we start at like NCAA or professional programs, we're going to see a trickle down into youth sports, which could be an earlier intervention point. That being said, there are some really strong programs and leagues that really do care about it. So individual programs, there are some that are doing a really great job at this. From a systems level, there is not a system intervention at this point in time. There are certain programs that have implemented intervention.
Can you give an example of what that looks like and who it might be and what it looks like? How can we tell, what does success look like? How do we know it's doing its job?
Yeah, I think like thinking about from a parent's perspective, what I would look for, and I do look for in my kids. I mean, you know this, right? With your own kids, mm-hmm. Like you can tell when your kid comes home from certain programs, how they're feeling, what the experience is, what are they learning beyond the technical skill. The biggest example was our oldest is nine, like tiny little guy, right? 9. But he just started, and he doesn't love baseball, but he wanted to try out for this baseball team, made it. And the first few weeks, Adam and I were kind of like, dang, Camden comes home like dialed. He is on point. And then started to just notice the consistency in which that was happening, right? Instead of like shoving his brother and sister when he got home, he was giving them his food. So things that were just like, he was more collaborative and kind and grounded and connected to himself in this like very aligned way versus twitchy and reactive and impulsive. That was a direct indicator, and still is, of what this league is cultivating within him and how he feels there and how that translates to when he comes home. So I think for parents, on like a very simple, tangible step, that's what I would look for. How does your kid come home? What do they seem like? What do you notice? What changes do you notice? And using some curiosity of, I want to learn more about that. What does it feel like to you when you come home from that sport versus this sport, or this activity when you're around these certain people versus this other activity around other people? Noticing some of that can be a tangible tool, right? Like, we can't aim, like, my goal is like changing the system, but as a parent, we have to get down more into like the nuts and bolts of it.
And so I'm going to ask you the $1 million question, but what if I am a parent who's in that environment where it isn't healthy, what tools do I have? Where do I go to help navigate that?
Totally. It's a tricky one, right? Like, the first thing I always say is safety. So if there is any safety concern, whether that's emotional abuse, physical abuse, those are times that immediate intervention is required. So immediately intervene if there are safety concerns. If there are, like, is kind of this like, what is happening? Like, my kid seems dysregulated, the coach seems mean, they're not accessible, whatever the concerns are. Those are opportunities to slow down and get really clear. Also making sure, am I as a parent reacting, or is my kid having a problem with it? Because that's a really important distinguisher too of, as parents, some parents get really like upset about playtime, right? I can't believe my kid wasn't in the game more. They deserve more playtime. They're better. Their stats are better. And then you ask the kid and the kid is like, meh. Okay, so it's the kid's journey. It's not the parent's journey, right? So knowing, what does your kid need and what are they wanting? Because you can be an advocate for them if that's something that they're wanting, even if it's playtime, right? Okay, they're disappointed in their playtime, feels like it's not fair. The coach isn't really seeing their skill set. They're not getting the same opportunity. It's important for your athlete to articulate that. What have they tried? What have been their tactics? Have they been effective? Have they not? Where's the breakdown happening? And at what point is parent intervention necessary? And different leagues have different kind of parameters about how parents should intervene. But ultimately, you want to support your kid, right? So you want to help them get to the results that they're looking for, if that's their goal. Yeah. But you as a parent have to be regulated first, right? I've gotten so many calls from parents who are like, we need you to come in and like fix this program. And I'll listen to the parents, and every single time I'm like, you know what? I'd rather meet with the parent group first. Let me meet with the parents first so that we can get an understanding of, how you all are doing. And do you want to know how many parent groups have taken me up on it? Zero. So parents have to also notice, what is my role and how am I contributing to this? It's a lot easier to point the finger than regulate yourself and notice what's coming up for you, and doing some of that work, which is really the best modeling we can do for our kids too.
Speaking to the choir. Yes, it's exactly the work I'm doing, right? And it is fun when you get them to say, hey, we all have a role in this, the coaches, the organization, the kids, the parents. If we all could hold hands and realize that nobody's doing this perfectly, and it isn't one that needs to fix things, it's all of us in order to support the child, which is ultimately the goal, right? But it also, I think, in a lot of times it's misaligned goals, right? Like, I'm going to speak to some parents for a volleyball club here, and I talked to the head of the club yesterday, and she said, well, all these parents nowadays, it's like, if I'm not on the top team, why play, right? So there's such a pressure from the parents. They said, well, your kid's doing really well. Yeah. She loves it. Oh, yeah. She's learning a ton. Oh, she's in a healthy environment. Okay, so let's run down all the things you just said about why you're here. And then let's talk about how important it is whether she's on a ones team or a twos team.
Right. Yep. It is. I totally agree with what you're saying is it's the long game, right? And I think that's where I see it at 9-year-olds sitting on the sideline, like watching parents has become my favorite pastime of like, they're 9, like they like literally are just learning all of these, or they should be just learning a lot of these skills, right? So you amp up as the levels go on and the pressure gets higher and the expectations get higher. Um, and when I say long game, I don't mean like you're going to make it to the Olympics. Maybe some
Yeah.
people are, or to the NBA or to the WNBA or to the National Soccer League. The goal is that you leave sport still loving sport, right? But if we suffocate it because there was so much pressure to make the one team versus the two team, people lose the love of sport. And really the whole hope of it is that there is a love of sport. And sometimes opportunity comes from that and other times it doesn't. But the biggest win is if you walk away from sport still loving the sport, in my opinion.
Yes, and you did have a quote in there too, and I agree 100%, which is athletes for life. I mean, that's what we're trying to create is somebody who still wants to be active, not necessarily competitive, but active at 25 and 35 and 45 because of all of the things around mental health that it will help her be less depressed, less anxious, be able to self-regulate, be able to self-soothe, be able to, you know, be a functioning member of society and not be so racked about what happened 20 years ago and traumatized by that I can't move forward.
Because there's so much goodness in sport, right? So many life skills are developed through sport. It's a great catalyst that's going to transfer to all other areas in which they choose to engage at all stages of their life, right? So we don't want to get so siloed of like, at 9, they didn't make the elite travel team. Like, I guess they're going to need to choose a new sport. It's like, what? No, do they still love that sport? Let them play that sport. It doesn't matter what team they're on.
And I think some of it, or so much of it, is environmental, right? I had a woman call me yesterday whose daughter's been doing gymnastics since 3 and just started playing softball about 3 years ago. And she's going into the #1 high school in their area for both. They win state in gymnastics and softball. And she's thinking she wants to, I find this even interesting. She said, well, she thinks she wants to play softball in college. I'm like, she doesn't know what she wants for dinner, much less what she wants to do 5 years from now, right? You know, let's be honest. But you have the parents around you and the coaches around you. And she goes, well, that's what I think. But my husband's like, well, if we're going to get recruited for softball, then you're supposed to be sending out 100 emails a week and you're supposed to be doing videos and you're supposed to be, you've got to go to this tournament and that tournament and this showcase or you're going to miss it. Right. So that's the pressure that these kids are feeling. And she's like, and we're at a cute little studio where she's the best athlete and the best gymnast in the whole place. And that I went to the director and said, is it all right if she didn't do it all the time? And she goes, oh, absolutely. We're just happy to have her. I said, well, then you do not want to take her out of that environment. And all for the idea that, we have to start front loading for something that, to your point, may never come. I mean, that's in 2 years, she could say, I want to do MUN, or I want to be in the debate team, or I want to do hang gliding, for all you know, right? Like to say that just because all of a sudden she thinks softball might be more fun than gymnastics, we don't need to, burn the boats for, what may or may not happen. I mean, I said that by junior year, maybe start thinking about if this is something, but probably more like, having 2 kids that didn't get recruited out of high school, didn't get recruited till after high school these days, unless you're a phenom, they'll find you. Trust me.
Yep. And you'll find your way if it's meant to be. It's like if you love it enough and you're willing to be gritty and go in a different path, like there will be opportunity if that's something that you love and you have that ability and you have that grit and determination. So it isn't linear. There was a gal we interviewed through the book writing process, and she was a swimmer. From the time she was tiny, she was a swimmer. And she said her parents always said to her, hey, we want you to know, like, we understand we are driving in this bus with you, but we will stop at any point in time. We will stop at any point in time if you decide this isn't what you want to be doing. And she ended up going on to swim at this like major D1 school, had an unfortunately terrible experience. But she said, knowing that I had maneuverability was so freeing. It really was my choice. It wasn't about this pressure or expectation that that was the goal that I had to achieve. I just got to enjoy the process. And that's the beautiful part of it, right? Enjoy the process, be in the minute, enjoy that season. If you want to play something different the next season, put yourself in a position to have that maneuverability, because you don't have to be locked in forever and always. But young kids are feeling like they have to choose a sport at tiny ages and love it forever. It's like, I don't know about you, but like, I change my mind a lot still. I find interest in different things frequently, and we need to change it to stay inspired and passionate. So we want them to have maneuverability still.
Yes. Yeah. So many of I'm seeing different clients pop into mind as you're telling these stories, because I think it is such a reoccurring theme. And then on the flip side, I just saw Scotty Scheffler win the Masters for the second time at age 27. And you hear him interviewed, and he says, my mom worked, my dad stayed home. They said, focus on being a good person, being kind, right? And he's like, I never felt pressure to play. And he goes, I just would go do the work, and then I show up, and whatever result I get there is based on what the work is that I put in before. But I feel like these kids are getting to the moment, whether it's coming off the blocks or being in the game or striking out. Actually, I had heard that story too. A girl like feeling awful because she struck out, and her dad made her walk home in her cleats from her softball game at age 14 because she struck out. Like, as if anyone stands at the plate and looks to humiliate themselves, right? It's really heartbreaking to hear how kids are feeling about, and now we wonder why 70% of kids are dropping out of sport altogether by age 13, and girls at twice the rate of boys.
Right. And if we think about that story you just told about the softball player from a mental health perspective, what's happening is that's creating the neural pathways, right? So now when she's going to get up to bat, she's not going to have fun. She's not going to be loose. She's not going to be focused. She's going to be thinking about hoofing it home in her cleats at 14 years old, right? Like, her odds of then striking out again are exceptionally high because of the correlation that then was occurring. And I think that's the part. And what I love most about the topic of mental health, and particularly mental health integration into sport, is the contradiction, right? The paradox of what people think they're doing. Oftentimes we need to be doing the opposite, right? I'm sure that dad hopefully was at least like trying to do something well-intentioned. I don't know the mission behind his thing, but like, it's actually going to have an adverse effect. So what we know for athletics is you have to have a level of dissociation, right? That's required. You're not going to push your body to the extreme measures that are required through connectivity to self. So you're going to have to dissociate at some level. But what we know leads to optimized mental health is deep connection to self. And so this is where people get kind of wigged out about this idea of integration, is that's going to take away the edge. And this is what we heard from coaches in particular a lot of, you're trying to make sports soft, which is not true, and an interesting conversation, yada, yada. But we're like, actually, you can hold space for both, but we have to help athletes learn how to do that. We have to help them learn that it's more about being able to change gears so that you can go into this overdrive gear for hard training blocks, competition, but then you know how to downshift on recovery days or recovery chunks of time so that you can establish this connection to self to get inventory of where am I really at? What am I needing? And then what happens is people who are able to do that are able to actually accelerate even more when they go into that overdrive. But it's about trusting self that they're going to be able to change gears versus thinking, I need to toe this fine line forever and always. And we know that's not sustainable, right? That's when we talk about burnout, injury, illness, things of that nature come because we've tried to push it for too long at a high level without the opportunity to back off. But athletics is about being at that optimized state, but we need to know we can do both. Those can coexist, even though it is a paradox.
So then on the bigger, I agree 100%. And it just seems like it's coming back to what messages are we telling our athletes as parents, and what messages are we telling our athletes as coaches about what we value, by not even as much as what we say, but what we do. Well, both, but as much by what we do and how we respond in stressful situations, you didn't hit the ball, right? Because what is that then telling our kids about what we value?
Right. Yep. And there's this like, my husband Adam gives me a hard time about this, but one of my very favorite quotes from grad school in one of the books was, "One cannot not communicate." And it's so true, right? Of like, you're sitting on the sideline watching your kid and you're like, hello, you might be saying 0 words, but your body is conveying all the message that is needed. And so we do have to be mindful in not just what we say, but how we say it is way more important. And we've had this conversation with coaches all the time of like, I did that. I was curious. I tried that. And it's like, okay, but how did you say it? Because if you just said it, we could say, how are you? Or how are you? And they're going to provide something very different, right? One is like, I'm not going to trust you and actually share anything, versus one could be an opening to actually engage in conversation. So how it is said makes a huge difference. And what type of relationship is at the foundational level? Is there trust? Is there interest? Does the coach know something about the athlete beyond what they're able to provide in the athletic arena? There has to be little connectors. Otherwise, it is all just objective based. And it's going to be this churn and burn system where people are just showing up to compete and perform, and people will burn out, but it's kind of a conveyor belt. So people will come and people will go. But it isn't, we know the best results aren't happening in those types of systems anyway. And that is, they're not how you're going to get longevity out of athletes.
Not sustainable.
Yeah.
So when I work with athletes, I like to give them assignments, and it could be taking box press before they step on to serve the ball, or just, do you have tools like that anything that you can think of that would be in a situation for an athlete or the parent that they've identified that this is what's happening? I feel stressed and I'm opting out. Like, what are the go-to tools that you use to help them address that?
Yeah. I mean, the very first thing is people have to notice, right? If you don't take the time to notice, what is my experience, or how is that feeling, or what does that mean when I'm doing X, Y, or Z, you're not going to be able to ask yourself any question. So the very first step is taking the time, and it doesn't have to be a ton of time. It doesn't need to be like kumbaya. It can be when you're laying in bed, take 90 seconds to say, how am I feeling? What am I noticing? What is my body telling me? Right? Of taking inventory. If you want to be able to identify feelings, you have to start noticing what they are and how they show up in your body, and how they show up in your thoughts, and how it shows up in your behaviors. Because it's really hard to be able to distinguish. I actually texted Tiffany this morning and I was like, I don't even really know the feeling that I would pair to this. I don't know what feeling it is. So you have to sit with it and get really curious of distinguishing of, is it sadness? Is it resentment? Is it embarrassment? Is it disappointment? What, all of them can look very different, but they all represent something differently. So you have to just peel the onion back and begin to notice. That's really the most important first step, in my opinion.
Yes. I call that name it to tame it, right? So if you identify, if you can identify what it is, then, and talk about it and get it out, then you can actually and sometimes it helps just to get it out, like to be able to say it, to be able to write it down, to be able to talk to somebody about it, that then they can go, oh, that's what that is. I'm actually injured because I'm afraid that I'm going to run the race and I'm going to be last. So I'm going to be injured because it's just better than me trying and not getting the mark.
And our brain plays tricks on us, right? So we can have all these feelings, and what's going to happen is if we're holding them in, they're actually going to exacerbate, versus if we can name it, to tame it, if you will, they begin to dissipate because it isn't spinning the spider web of ideas and concepts. We're able to intervene and say, oh, that's what it is. I'm nervous. I'm going to get last. Okay, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I do indeed get last? Is that really going to be a crisis? Is that something that's going to be like, what's the worst thing that will possibly happen from that? Oh, okay. I guess I don't need to do this injury thing. I can do it because now I deconstructed it, and it isn't actually as big and scary as it felt when I just had it all inside.
Hopefully. But I do have clients that say, no, my parents say they don't care, but they really care. And I need to win, right? So I think that's the pressure that they're feeling, is it's safer to be injured than it is to go for it. And actually, another I was up in Portland speaking a couple weeks ago, and one of the dads came up to me, and he's coaching 12U baseball. And he says, we're up 14-4 after 2 innings. And then I hear the coach, from the other team say, don't swing. And what he realizes is the pitchers at 12 can't, for, kid pitch for the first, second year, whatever, can't get the ball over the plate. So if we stand there and never swing, then we're going to get walked. So the ending score after 9 innings was 14-14. And the other opposing team never swung the bat. Yeah. So what are we teaching the kids about what this is about? Stay in the box, play scared.
Yep.
Don't take any risks.
Yep.
And we're going to hope we're going to win at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
12.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. It's the saddest part of it's the lack of confidence that we're instilling in kids, right? No, really, that should be the greatest skill they're walking away from sport with, is this innate confidence. And instead, we're teaching them to play small, get small, don't take the risk, when in reality, it's like, no, play big, take the risk, fail, be okay with that, and learn how to fail, and then continue going, right? Like, that's really what my hope is my kids learn from sport, is failing's just a part of it. You're going to strike out. That's like the name of the game, right? Especially if we're talking baseball, like literally speaking. So we want them to know how to fail because we want them to be able to trust themselves, whether they choose to change another sport or later in life. That's that transferable skill that we want to see keep showing up for them, right? Of like, if there's one hope for my kids, it's that. I want you to feel so confident in yourself that you can do whatever it is you want to do.
You just missed the best opportunity to learn something. And in fact, now all you've done is hardwire in the message that it's whatever I should do, I should just not take any risks at all. Yet the major league all-stars, the ones that make $100 million, whatever contracts, they only hit the ball 3 out of every 10 times they're at the plate. Those are the ones making hundreds of millions of dollars. So the expectation that our 10-year-old or 12-year-old or 15-year-old should stand at the plate and bat 1,000 or not bat at all, not only is it ludicrous, it's crushing to what the whole point of playing sports is, right?
Totally. I say that to parents all the time of like, we couldn't hang a day in teen shoes, right? Of what is expected of them, and it's never enough. They don't get any reprieve. There's no recovery. There's no room for maneuverability. Like, that isn't, like, we've got to rebalance that scale.
Yeah, it's gotten so far. And then, again, I'm guessing if I put that coach's hat on, well, we got to win, because if we're not win, then we don't make it to the playoffs. If we don't make it to the playoffs, and that means I'm a bad coach, right? Like, 12U, who cares what, this should not be. I was just reading about Norway again this morning, because it's so fascinating, right? They have the highest number of medal winners in the Olympics per capita than any country in the world. I think in the last Olympics they had 39. They got 39 medals in a country of 5 million people, which is like, compared to the US, I think 125 or something. And they don't have any sports that keep any scores until 13. And they don't have any travel sports until 16, right? So we just help you get better and develop skills and learn how to be the team, be a part of a team, and winning and losing and all of that, so that when you finally maybe at 16 go, ooh, I like this, or ooh, you're pretty good at this, then we can start worrying about what the score is, right?
100%. Camden is on a lacrosse team, and he plays with like his very best buddy. I think that's why he wanted to do it. And they had a tournament last weekend, and it was like rainy and icky, but like he was stoked to be out there. And he had some, like, objectively speaking, like, scored a lot of goals, played like quite well. I asked him at the end of it, I said, hey, what was your favorite part? And he goes, all the time I got to spend with Tennyson. That was my very favorite part. That is what it should be. That is exactly what it should be. Like, you got to go out and play in the rain with your buddy and like pass to each other and play and celebrate and have the snacks in between the game. Like, that is the fun part. That's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember how many goals they scored at some random tournament. Like, doesn't matter.
Right. Totally. That's a great story. And the one video that keeps popping up in my feed, probably because I liked it so much, but I think he was a basketball player from Boston College, and he's sitting at the media table and crying. It's his last game ever. And they're saying, tell us what was the highlight of your time here at Boston College? And long pause, like 30 seconds, because he can't gather himself. And then he says, going out to dinner. Like being with my teammates, right? Like that's what I value. It's that, I mean, and so many kids, right? And the parents like, well, it doesn't matter. Like we have to go, we're going to move to this club and then we're going to move to that club. And you're completely missing the whole reason your 9-year-old, the mom I was talking to the other day, she's like, we traveled 2 hours each way for 14U volleyball because, she wanted to be on the top team and they're the top team in Southern California. And we need to do that. And I was like, I rethink that.
Yeah. Yep. It's about sense of belonging. It's about community, right? That's what we all need. We're wired for connection, and sports are a way of achieving that. That's what it's all about at the very primal level. How do you feel?
Yeah. We could go on all day, obviously, but before we move on to the end, let's dive into any tips or, I don't know, I'm just thinking about, I love when parents can listen to this and be like, oh, I got something that I can use. Like, are there any things as a parent or a coach or an athlete that would be helpful from your standpoint? What are you seeing the most coming to you looking for help and tools? And where would you send them? What advice would you have?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, actually. So Tiffany and I have a podcast called Sport Shrinks, and parents or coaches, whoever, submit a question and we kind of talk about it. And one of them a couple weeks ago was about performance anxiety. And, like podcast fashion, we were talking about it and just kind of bantering about it. And I was like, I wish it could be banned. I really wish it could be banned. And she's like, whoa, that's a little harsh. And I was like, I know, I understand, it's a way, an accessible way for people to come into the door for therapy. But I think oftentimes in sports, when we think about mental health, we oftentimes think about it as this performance anxiety thing. And that's the primary way I get referrals is they have performance anxiety. They need help. They need help. And it's yet another way of just placing blame on the student athlete and another task for them to have to just reconcile their anxiety. And I've never met an athlete whose performance is faltering because of performance anxiety. Right? Their performance might be faltering, but it's generally because of grief, disordered eating, substance use, family inner turmoil within the family system, a breakup. There's a lot of other things that contribute to that. And I think we do a disservice, to the athletes and also to the mental health field. We need to be named, similar to the notion of naming what your own experience is. We need to be naming things what they actually are instead of putting them under this, in my opinion, umbrella of performance anxiety, because it's such a simplification. And yet again, I take that as this blame of the athlete, because athletes will come in kind of wigged out. My coach says I have performance anxiety. What do I do about that? And you get to know the athlete, and there's so much more there. And that's what's impacting their performance. So I think if we can slow down and really get curious and learn what the athlete's experience is and work to connect with them and believe them and trust them, that's going to be the very best tool that can be employed, whether that's by coaches or parents.
I 100% agree. And I believe one of the major reasons for that is because the system is broken. Correct. In that with youth sports being everything is about this showcase or this tournament or this moment, and coaches will be like, well, you had your shot. So everything is, there isn't just we're just going to play and see how it goes. Everything comes down to them feeling like they have to perform in this moment or it's over for me at 12 and 14 and 16. And it's pressure that we never felt at this age, for sure.
No. And have you ever met a human that perform at every single moment anytime you ask them to step on the stage? Never.
Yeah.
Right? Like there isn't anybody who is 100% ever. When it, like cross industries, right? Like ever. Every athlete has bad games, bad seasons, bad life cycle stages, like bad, lack of a better word, but like not as high performing, right? Like they're not going to show up an ace every single game. Nobody can do that at all.
Yeah. Not realistic.
It's
Yeah.
not realistic. Like
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
have situations just like waking up in the morning. Like some days we feel like on cloud nine with high motivation and super like pumped to take on the day. And other days you wake like literally just by waking up, you're like, like I'm kind of in a funk. Like I don't feel as great. Like I'd rather just like roll over and go back to bed. So at like the very basic level, there is fluctuation. Of course, we're going to see fluctuation in performance. We should be seeing fluctuation in performance.
Yes. And giving them a soft place to say, wow, that sucked. Right. Like, how did you feel about that? Ooh, that was awful. Oh, yeah. Great. We get to do it again tomorrow. You can try again tomorrow. Right.
Yep. Like
let it go.
The heartbreaking stories of kids on like the heartbreak and agony that comes from the car ride home or walking in the door after a game, like that we can, one of the things I'm so passionate about with this topic is that we can prevent so much of it. And those are ways we can prevent it. Your kid doesn't want to talk about the game? Great. Talk about something else. They have a coach. You don't need to deconstruct every play and every error they made. Let them guide that discussion. What do they want to talk about after the game? You do not need to berate them. I assure you, it will not make them a better athlete.
And to parents who say, well, that's all we have in common, like that's what we're doing all the time, that's your number one indicator that you need to pick up something else, right? Even if it's planning for a vacation or going on a walk on the weekend or finding something else. You know, my husband and my daughter like certain kind of movies that I happen to not like at all. So like, that's their thing. I'm like, you guys go have fun at your sci-fi movie. I'm out, right? And that's great, right? Like, we all need different ways to connect with our kids, and we don't all have to be doing all of them at the same time together either, right? So I always look at that as a research project. Like, if you're finding that you're kind of always going into this wall and it's not working, there's a reason for that. And it's an opportunity to ask better questions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That can be parent-led, right? I think we put a lot of that on like, well, my kid's not coming to me. And it's like, yeah, they're a teenager. Like you're going to need to work a little bit harder. You're going to have to like do some trial and error of like, I don't know, do they like ice cream? Do they love Slurpees? My guess is they're going to take you up on lunch. So like let them choose a lunch spot and then you have an inlet, right? Help like just keep trying. Find things. Sport should not be your primary or only connector.
Yes. Amen. Well, Katie, this has been so much fun. I love connecting with you always and all that you're doing. Tell everybody where they can find you, find the book, talk about what's coming in these next few months. They're going to be super exciting for you. I'm so excited for your book and to get out there. We need this message so much. And I know parents and coaches and athletes are going to love it.
Oh, your support means more than you know. You can find Tiffany and I do athletesmentalhealthfoundation.org is the website. And we have trainings for coaches, athletes, and parents that are free on that site. Same handle for Instagram. So we try to chunk it down to give people some more bite-sized pieces on social media. We have a podcast called Sports Shrink. And our book, The Price She Pays, which I can't wait for it to come out June 18th. You can pre-order wherever you order books or like to get books.
And will you be on a world tour speaking in a city near you?
God, we are in the midst of planning the book tour. So we have a couple spots we're going to be. We're going to go to some of the main Olympic trials venues like track and fields in Eugene, gymnastics is in Minneapolis. Swimming is in Indianapolis, and then a couple other things throughout. So we have some things that we're looking forward to. And it's the best part's been this, like meeting people like you and kind of the collection of people that come together. So I'm really excited to get out from like beyond the screen and the rooms that it's all been created and like see people and share stories and make connection.
Oh, Well, I can't wait. And whatever I can do to support you and or collaborate with you, even better, right? That's the good stuff. I'm all about, let's do this together. 1+1 is 3.
Yes, 100%. Yes, it is a collective. We are going to have the biggest impact all together. And it's so fun finding like-minded people because we need each other.
That's right. Okay, so before I let you go, the last question that we ask all of our guests. How would you answer this? And you can go on for a paragraph or you can say a word, but however you feel what comes up for you first when I say the best athletes I know do this.
Have perspective.
And how do you get that perspective?
They keep focus on the big picture, though. They're fueled by passion, but don't get their vision looking through a straw. They stay engaged in life. They stay connected to themselves.
Love it. So good. Yay. Well, thank you so much. Parents, athletes, coaches, please like, share. We're trying to get this word out and let people know that when we know better, we do better. And that's what our intention here is at Raising Athletes, is sharing the word of nobody's doing this perfectly. We're all falling down, standing up, trying to do it all over again, and hopefully learning along the way. So thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon. Let's do this.
Hey, Raising Athletes podcast fans, Kirsten here, and I have to share my new favorite hydration secret with you. Corvive's Hydrate in pink lemonade. If you're looking for the ultimate hydration boost, this is it. Corvive's Hydrate is an NSF certified for sport, trusted by 4 Major League Baseball teams and 3 military bases. With 6 grams of pure organic cane sugar, it ensures you absorb all the electrolytes you need. And get this, it has 3 times the electrolytes and 4 times less sugar than those leading brands. Plus, it's developed using the World Health Organization's standards for oral rehydration solutions, making it the equivalent of a bag of IV fluids. Best of all, there are no artificial dyes or sweeteners. It's so perfect for the entire family. You can drink it any time of day, before, during, or after workouts or sports. So say goodbye to sugary juices and hello to superior hydration with Corvive's Hydrate in pink lemonade. Visit corvive.com. That's CORVIVE.com. And use promo code Kirsten. That's KIRSTEN for 30% off your order. Try it today and feel the difference. Kirsten and Matt here for a little post-game teardown. Love to chit-chat with the guest, and then it's always fun to kind of talk about what we heard and how we can reframe it. That might be helpful for you, the listeners, and some top takeaways. So, Matt, let's start with you. What did you hear?
So, I mean, I heard so many great things from Katie. She's excellent at what she does. She's got a new book coming out that we have to plug. I'm excited for it. We both got a copy of it, and I'm excited to give it an early read. The one thing, she has an absolutely crazy story. But before we get into that, as a mental health professional, yourself and her, she sees a lot of athletes come in looking for the cure to performance anxiety. And then when you really start talking to them, you go, this has nothing to do with fear of performing. It has everything to do with everything else that an athlete has to deal with and a human being has to deal with. So kind of talk me through your perspective of when an athlete comes to you looking for the fix.
Yeah, I think it is asking the right questions to find out what is it they're really asking. Because it presents, and usually that's what happens, it presents as one thing, like they're throwing up, or they're injured all the time, or they're crying before practice, and this is something that they really used to love. So you have to start asking, why do you think those things are really happening? Not just, well, she's afraid she's going to lose, or if she's afraid she's not going to start. But there's usually a reason underneath. And I love what she said, which was, we have a plan for things going well, right? So we also need a plan for mental health. Like, for the physical side of the game, we have tools for getting better at drills and getting better at, like playing as a team and all of that. But we don't look at mental health as a opportunity to put positive, I think you got to get out in front of it so that you don't end up in that situation where the coach is using that as a, well, she just can't perform.
Yeah, and I think for any athlete out there, if you're so wrapped up in the sport itself that you not starting, being afraid to lose, you're not enjoying the process of it. You're not enjoying, you're not seeking joy. You're just seeking the accomplishments. And at that, it's always going to come to a head at a certain point. So I think that that's like, as for Katie's job, for your job, like you guys are amazing at asking the questions that are really going to, tear down why do you love this sport? And it's rarely is the answer the wins. Rarely is the answer the wins. It's the team, it's the locker room, it's the environment. So it's asking those questions, why you enjoy it and why are you not enjoying it? And as an athlete, a few months ago when I was on a team, those were the questions that always ended up, clearing the space so I could get onto the field in any capacity and perform. And one thing that you guys went over in the podcast as well is athletes are afraid these days. There's athletes, and I experienced this not personally, but with teammates at my team in the past who felt as if it was safer to be injured rather than to actually play. Do you see that often, like working with clients and working with athletes?
Yeah, they're, as Katie and I chatted about a bit, I think their feelings, there's no one you want to impress more or make happier than your parents. That's it, right? And if you feel like their love is contingent upon my performance, it's going to start to add stress to it. And I have a lot of parents who say, yeah, but I always tell them I don't really care. Okay, you may say those words, but then how are you behaving on the sidelines, in the car ride home? What are you, telling them about what's important to you, and what are you showing them about what's important to you? And sometimes I say to parents, like, miss a game, miss a practice. Like, I think sitting through practices for parents is ridiculous. Like, go run a lap or go run an errand or something. But if the only thing you're there for is to make sure she gets who's getting the reps in practice, you're basically just hovering to the point of putting more pressure on your kid. Well, some parents say, yeah, but I really love it. I really love it. That's fine, but you also need to allow them some time to just be able to grow on their own. And again, my father always said, if you're doing it because you think it's going to make us happy, you can quit. Like, you should be playing because you want to play. And parents, you should be asking them, who are you doing this for? And if they feel the obligation of making you happy, that's the wrong reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And the parents in general tend to get themselves tied up in their own ego, tied up in how their kids do in sports. And I think, that just puts so much more pressure on what's supposed to be, for me, soccer was an outlet growing up. That was where, no matter how bad of a day of school I had, I walked onto the pitch and I got to just play and be happy and feel relaxed. And there were bad sessions and there were days where I felt like my coach didn't like me or I was worried that I wasn't going to play that weekend, but it never stopped me from showing up. It never stopped me from wanting to be there. And, the people that I think have so much control over these athletes, and, it's something that Katie went into with her own personal story, which was pretty crazy about, being put on medication she never needed and her whole medical, all of her medical being overlooked by someone that she thought was a mentor for her. And, you know, people don't understand the control that these coaches have over the mental well-being of these players and over the physical well-being of these players. So talk to the coaches for a second so that they hear you and can understand where, how much control they have over these athletes.
I think coaches have a tremendous amount of pressure on them. And depending on what program you are in and what level you're in, of course you're hired to win. There isn't a club or a college or a program in the country that's like, we're great at 0-25. We don't care. Of course we care about winning. And if you're doing it at the risk and to the jeopardy of everything else going well, does it really matter is my question. And sometimes we can get short-term results, but do long-term damage. And that's what she's talking about, is having coaches that they didn't care about her as an individual, but rather what was it going to do for their star athlete. And I think you hear that, unfortunately, more than we should, particularly in youth sports, when it really should just be about, it's a great outlet. It's where my friends are. I just want to be social. I just want to have, I'm not trying to play in college. I might not even be trying to play in high school, but I believe you should walk away from youth sports with a, wow, that was fun, first of all, and I learned a lot about who I am as a person. I got challenged. Doesn't mean I liked every single moment of it. Doesn't mean I wasn't uncomfortable sometimes. But I should always be put in situations that are going to be, I'm going to feel supported and, nurtured in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what the coaches' jobs are. Like at the end of the day, for me, the best coaches, talk to me for 10 minutes about how I was playing and 30 minutes about how I'm doing. And those are the relationships that you end up cherishing. Those are the coaches that I still text, that I still call, and I got 3 or 4 of them. And then there's other ones that it's like, if I walked by them in the supermarket, I'd probably put my head down just because I got no issues. I don't hold anything against them. They did the best they could, I think, and I did the best I could, and we didn't get along, but they had an opportunity to make an impact and they didn't make an impact. And I think that all coaches should be looking at is how can I make an impact on these young people's lives?
I think the easiest quote that always sticks in my head is, people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And if that person had a positive impact on you, you won't probably remember any of those conversations, but you'll know in your heart, wow, that person cared about me. And that ultimately is what coaching is, what teaching is, what parenting is. That's what the opportunity. And I think if you can show by your actions and by who you are, by what you model, that's what your values are, you're going to have, again, maybe not the best record, but you're gonna develop people into great humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was
Great.
fun. Yeah. I really enjoyed watching this podcast and being part of this podcast with Katie. It was I think you guys had great energy and you do very similar stuff and you're preaching the same message. So you guys you and Katie got to do more together. And
I would love to do more with Katie. She's amazing. Yeah. I hopefully we can manifest getting on a stage together, or we're doing, I don't know, a course or something, because I fully believe in, we're doing the same work, and it's really fun to all hold hands and help each other to do it better. So
yeah,
we've got this.
Awesome.
Hey, Raising Athletes podcast listeners. I'm thrilled to announce our new proud partner, Corvive Natural Health Supplements. Corvive offers top-notch natural products designed to boost your health and wellness. From hydration to daily supplements, Corvive has you covered. Check them out today at kirstenjones.com. That's KirstenJonesinc.com or corvive.com, corvive.com, and use promo code Kirsten, Kirsten, to experience the difference for yourself.